Does the Nice Way Work? By Sayyedah Abidi. So here's the problem. The individualistic culture that American citizens are being raised upon has taken its toll. Their relationships at work or within the family or among peers too often lack the element of sacrifice. Nowadays, it's all about how one can get more and give less. Those in power believe that giving up some of their preferences in favor of their subordinates will threaten their authority and make their leadership less effective. So for my research problem, I would like to counter this assumption and prove that having empathy and fostering goodwill is a worthy investment for leaders. So I'm going to draw on my knowledge of sociology through the big three perspectives and, seeing this problem from those lenses. And I'm also going to recall what I learned in business courses about teamwork and leadership to explain how positive leader-to-team relations can increase efficiency, self-motivation, and ethics. And finally, I'm going to integrate my communication studies minor, as well as my personal experiences as the oldest child in my family, into elaborating practical approaches to communicate empathy to one's team. So I'm going to try to, jump around these different minors and integrate concepts from them into each argument. And I'm also going to organize the whole project around the stages of this marketing model that I learned about in my business courses: needs analysis, strategy development, and implementation. I tried the nice way. You've likely heard this in real life and movies from authorities such as parents, teachers, or bosses, right before they exact a harsh punishment or threat upon an unfortunate subordinate. The popularity of this saying sheds light on a common stereotype, that the only way to be effective is the mean way, a strict and unaccommodating style adopted by many leaders today. It's problematic due to its lack of one extremely vital but often neglected part of a relationship: goodwill. For example, bosses in the workplace are notorious for being harsh and overbearing because they have been socialized to believe that the more they crush and subdue their subordinates, the more cooperation they will receive. Because of these values that society has established, the mean way is their default strategy. However, this controlling leadership style happens to be counterintuitive. In reality, it just forms barriers of resentment between managers and subordinates that reduce the quality of their collaboration and affect their communication and detach them from their work. Members of effective teams put their heart into their work and take ownership of the projects they are assigned, working together in a synergetic manner and being driven by intrinsic motivation. In contrast, stifled and detached workers only exert the minimum amount of effort, or even cut corners to get the job over with. According to Marx's theory of alienation, this leadership style can lead to real losses that leaders will have to take responsibility for. Workers' productivity is severely cut and they estrange themselves from their colleagues, preventing collaborative synergy. Additionally, managers cannot deny their occasional need for subordinates to surpass their job descriptions and perform tasks they didn't necessarily sign up for, such as staying at work past office hours for an important project or covering up for an absent employee. However, most managers are nearsighted in their assumption that they will never need their subordinates' favor or goodwill, like the lion in the renowned Lion and Mouse fable. If their relationship is hostile, they cannot expect compliance with those extra requests, which is needed much more often than they think. But goodwill is not just required for bonus favors. In any relationship, conflict is practically inevitable. Goodwill promotes selflessness and team spirit on both sides, and ensures that the ensuing discussions are solution-focused rather than problem-focused. So, it aids in the quickest, smoothest resolutions. When conflicts are prolonged, however, and escalated due to a lack of goodwill, work is interrupted and the manager in charge is held accountable. And harsh employers are just the tip of the iceberg. Outside of the workplace, teams are not merely commercial or temporary, and closer relationships entail an even greater need for goodwill. Parents, for example, are managers of their children. They must ensure that the child has eaten, done their homework, and fulfilled their obligations. Even though they do not complete these tasks themselves, the onus is still on the parents because their social duty is to effectively manage their children. Ask any effective parent and they will tell you to never underestimate the importance of voluntary cooperation on the child's part. Humans are creatures of free will, and one can never bring out a person's true potential through force. Imagine a student instructed to write happy birthday for spelling class, only working hard enough to check the box for that task. Compare that to the same child affectionately writing the same words as neatly, beautifully, and decoratively as possible in her mother's birthday card. In which instance will the quality of work be better? It is the one driven by goodwill rather than authority alone. And even before I took any sociology or management courses, my Islamic faith already taught me that I will find in gentleness what I can never get through compulsion, a lesson that has served me well. See, in my household, I am responsible for ensuring that my younger brother has completed his daily checklist by the end of each night. So I have learned to exercise empathy when picking my battles with him. I try my absolute best to accommodate his childish preferences whenever possible, taking the loss upon myself at times to preserve our goodwill. I also invest a lot of quality time for him, reading, playing, joking, giving hugs, and just chatting at his level. A lot of effort has gone into creating and maintaining this positive relationship, in conformity with my religious values and observational learning. And alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has really brought forth the fruits of my labor. It is a pleasure to work with this child, a statement that can't be said about many first graders. His first priority is to please me, and he offers his best cooperation in getting the job done together. He's extremely mature and understanding when my schedule doesn't allow me to sit with him at homework time, or feed him his food. And he tells me himself, "Don't worry, I've got this. I'll do my work, and you can go do yours." He's very appreciative of me and calls me his favorite person. Compare this to my teenage sister's experience managing our younger sister on the basis of society's stereotype that the mean way works. They are constantly arguing over petty matters and do not exert themselves towards building goodwill. I witness the hardships my teenage sister faces on a daily basis, bringing the horse to the water yet unable to force it to drink. She has yet to learn her lesson that her sisterly authority alone will not suffice to meet the teen's needs. If little sis simply refuses to multitask and decides she will only eat her required daily fruit serving after her math homework is complete, what can her manager do? Threats or coercive control do not work on her. In the end, both of them lose perks such as screen time and snacks that can only be earned if they succeed as a team. My teenage sister consults my mother after such situations, saying, "How can I work with such a stubborn child?" Mama advises her to focus on prevention instead of damage control. In other words, fostering goodwill so that little sis does not resist instructions in the first place. Personally, I know that little sis has a big heart and has the potential to be a great team partner if she didn't feel so threatened by her manager's harshness. My mother has also introduced us to her personal experience with relationship building, a method she coined the 2 years of tears. Her advice to newly married spouses is to spend their first 2 years exclusively building goodwill through a lifestyle of unilateral sacrifice, like she did with my father. Their future interactions over the years will be much more positive when they recall the favors and sacrifices they made for each other, and trust each other as well-wishers who are truly considerate of their feelings. It worked! Those who want their teams to prosper at work and at home need to realize that not only does the nice way work, but the mean way does not. So, how can the opposite view be held by most of society? Alas, in economics, the majority is always wrong. Sociologists would view the issue of erroneous leadership norms through different lenses. By functionalist standards, the mean boss stereotype serves a social function by keeping employees in check through fear. But it's also a dysfunction because it negatively affects social institutions, such as the family, classroom, and workplace. Society is held together by people working collectively in social groups, and disruptions in the seamlessness of their work, like resentment and conflict, will reduce the human capital they contribute. Therefore, positive reinforcement and effective leadership is essential to society's well-being. Conflict theorists, who believe that society is a battlefield for gaining power, would say that these normative expectations have been strategically placed to manipulate lower status employees or subordinates and keep them out of the way of the power elite, higher status managers. Maintaining the status quo reduces the threat of managers losing their power and social control over their subordinates. Finally, interactionists would point out that bosses act bossy because they are labeled as so, and that they are pressured by society to play the part they are expected to. Whichever perspective one adopts, it is evident that the mean way just is not working. It hampers the effectiveness of the leaders in question, and so the costs of fixing this problem outweigh the benefits. Fear-based management norms have to change if we are to succeed on a personal and societal level. What we need is a new management style to be integrated into our society's core values, an empathy-based one full of goodwill. Managers and subordinates, from parents to employers, will be on the same page so that they complement and synergize one another's work and get it done with the least amount of time and resources. In marketing, this is called efficiency. They will grow attachment to their product and to each other, averting any resentment that would disturb members' smoothness of work and cooperation. Leaders and followers will be at peace with empathetic managers and subordinates who are self-motivated in their care for the team's success. In marketing, this is called psychological ownership, and it results in workers who don't cut corners or do anything that will compromise the company's well-being. In marketing, this kind of sincerity is called ethics, and these factors form the foundation of a reliable, successful team. Okay, enough dreaming. How can all of this be achieved? Our need was goodwill. Our strategy must involve empathy. To support this hypothesis, let's take a look at the managerial grid model, a graph outlining common leadership styles with varying levels of work accountability and team well-being. The x-axis measures concern for the task at hand, accountability, while the y-axis indicates concern for interpersonal relationships, or empathy. Each leadership style has unique coordinates. For example, the impoverished style lies at 1-1, signifying disregard for both the task and the people. Just, forget that one ever existed. The problematic leadership style I am addressing is the authority compliance style at 9-1. These leaders feel a sense of responsibility for the assigned work, so they think they've got everything, but they neglect the other half of the equation, which is empathy. Simply put, authority compliance managers cannot feel their employees suffering, so their hearts don't have any mercy or consideration for their team members' personal well-being. These managers disregard the fact that they are dealing with human beings who have emotions, limits, and susceptibility to mistakes, so they stretch them so far that they break. Authority compliance leaders do not tolerate any shortfalls or deviations from their unwavering standards, and control their employees by means of rigidly strict rules and harsh deterrence. Because of their narrow focus on efficiency and results, their team members are secluded into their individual specializations, with their interaction minimized. This social isolation leads to feelings of alienation in members, the consequences of which were discussed earlier. The team may be highly efficient. According to the sociological deterrence theory, threats and force can indeed be used to control others' behavior, but authority compliance leadership comes at a cost, losing the creative decision-making that blossoms from group synergy and the productivity that sprouts from intrinsic motivation. Leaders must not underestimate the significance of these losses. There are situations when managers don't have time to constantly spur on employees, and they must rely on them to be self-driven. There are also many moments where workers are not being actively supervised, and managers essentially trust them to fulfill their contracts ethically. According to Hirsch's social bond theory, human beings are, by default, selfish, and the only thing restraining people from getting everything they desire the easy way, rather than the lawful way, is their social bond, their commitment and connection to their group. When someone values their relationships and face, which is a communication studies term for their public image or impression, so when you value, your place in your team, then you strive to preserve that place by complying with the group's policies and value systems. However, managers who have soured their relationships and threatened their subordinates' faces do not possess the asset of a social bond anymore. Then, what's left to hold back their subordinates from violating work ethics? When a worker's main objective is to dodge the boss's anger, but the boss imposes perfectionism on him or her and therefore offers destructive criticism with no encouragement, a goal means gap results. According to Merton's anomie strain theory, this creates a need for alternate solutions, such as innovation, which involves achieving a conventional goal using unconventional means. Subordinates may resort to deviant acts, such as dishonest reporting to avoid punishment. Resentment can even instigate serious crimes when it builds up and spirals out of control. When the job strain and burnout on employees crosses their limits, then the employees can cross limits too, even after they've left the company. Disgruntled workers have revolted in the past through crimes ranging from white-collar company sabotage to mass murder. These reasons are enough to keep any leader away from this insidious managerial style. So, should managers adopt the country club style at 1-9 and just let subordinates do as they please, neglecting the work that they're responsible for delegating? Of course not. Contrary to the common misconception, accountability and empathy are not mutually exclusive. That means you don't have to make the difficult choice between the task, controlling style, or your relationships, country club style. The opportunity cost, what you gave up to get it, would be too high in both cases. You don't even need to compromise by dividing your efforts so that only half goes into each commitment, called middle-of-the-road management. In communication studies, compromising actually means that both sides lose something. The leadership style I am proposing is a win-win, referred to as collaboration in communication studies. Riding high at 9-9 on the managerial grid, the team management style entails focusing on both tasks and people simultaneously as interdependent goals, allowing for high levels of both. This is similar to the two objectives of communication: understanding, basically getting the message across through clear transmission, and self-presentation, which is maintaining our public impression, or face. One must achieve both concurrently within a conversation to be effective. Leaders work with teams towards shared understanding and commitment. Subordinates do not feel alienated, disenfranchised, or stifled, so their social bonds will strengthen. Team managers go to great lengths to establish goodwill, not by leaving subordinates to their own fancies, but by caring for their needs, accommodating their preferences whenever humanly possible, involving them in decision-making, and offering genuine encouragement. In communication studies, these are called positive compliance gaining strategies, and they all incorporate the key element of empathy. Essentially, team managers treat subordinates how they themselves would want to be dealt with, while still maintaining authority and concern for the task. This is by far the most effective leadership style, because it not only takes care of the task at hand, but also ensures that the ones performing the task are exhibiting the highest levels of cooperation and productivity, resulting in optimum performance levels from a combination of efficiency, self-motivation, and ethics. Now that we have identified a need, goodwill, and a strategy to achieve it, empathy, we must work out ways to implement the design. After all, planning is only the first duty of a manager, followed by organizing, leading, and controlling. Organizing entails working out the details and exact steps of implementing our strategy. The first step in effectively managing a team is motivating yourself as a leader. Caring for both tasks and relationships takes effort, determination, and a spirit of collectivism. The team management style is sustainable only for truly sincere leaders who genuinely take their team as their own and do not consider giving up to be an option. If a leader is not willing to sacrifice for the common good of the team and work with them all the way to the end, he or she is not qualified to be a team manager. Self-motivation is the basis of unilateral sacrifice, a key component of starting a unified team. Once a leader has found motivation for themselves and have accepted the path of patient hard work that may at times exceed their fair share, they are ready to start developing or forming their team. First, managers must make a place in their subordinates' hearts by extending their relationship beyond the formal job description. This means two things. Firstly, expressing empathy, and secondly, investing in the team without expecting returns yet. It seems unfair now, but trust that the seeds you are planting now will bear worthy fruits later. Empathy means putting yourself in others' shoes, and requires being generous to others without feeling burdened since you take them as your own. I grew up with the Islamic principle that one cannot be a true believer until they wish for their brother what they wish for themselves. Muslims also learn that authority is a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if you show mercy to those less powerful than you, then He will have mercy on you. A more famous maxim is the golden rule: treat others as you wish to be treated. If not in the spirit of altruism, a manager ought to at least do it for the sake of team effectiveness, bearing in mind a simple business philosophy. When starting a company, the main objective must be growth, not profit. This is the hard part: high labor with low returns, and having to reinvest any revenue you did receive towards the growth of your business or team, with trust and hope in seemingly faraway future gains. Similarly, when starting a relationship with subordinates, one's focus should be on investing and establishing goodwill, not on receiving full compliance immediately. Managers' efforts should be unilateral, both externally and internally, meaning they should not even secretly feel entitled to their subordinates' obedience because of how well they have been treating them. And they should not translate such feelings into actions by freely asking members of their teams for favors or behaving officiously. Bossiness will water down a leader's efforts. Instead of producing goodwill in the team, it'll arouse suspicion that the manager has a selfish ulterior motive behind their kindnesses. Leaders should, in contrast, show empathy to their subordinates because they take ownership of them and want the best for their team. As a manager, you must be caring and patient with others. It seems obvious enough, but this is a concept often missed by members of our individualistic and impetuous society. People enter a relationship thinking, what can I get, but not what can I give. And this reminds me of some shopping research I was conducting with my family last year when we wanted to buy a satsuma tree. According to the experts, new satsuma trees will bear fruit quite soon, but it's not until the third year that the satsumas will be available for picking. In the first 2 years, the tree must be left undisturbed to grow and establish itself in its new environment. The owners must be patient to not reap the benefits yet, otherwise they will compromise the tree's future. Leader-team relationships work in the same way. The initial focus of a manager should be on building rather than receiving goodwill, so as not to kill the golden goose. So how can a manager communicate goodwill and empathy to subordinates? Some tried and tested methods are abundant encouragement, non-financial rewards such as homemade treats or a field trip to a favorite cafe after work, and helping employees with their tasks. However, managers should acknowledge that each team is unique, and a leader needs to tailor their behavior to their subordinates' specific love languages in order to win their hearts. This relates to a marketing practice known as targeting. Targeting, or appealing to a company's desired customer base, is preceded by segmenting, or identifying the characteristics, needs, or behaviors of customers. Likewise, a leader should strive to get to know their team's preferences, values, and needs so that they can show their support in those areas. While all men are created equal, they are also each distinctively different due to the varied combinations of social forces that influence them, consciously and subconsciously. For example, two people may live in the same family but have vastly dissimilar peers. So it's important to target each person as a separate case in order to align with their preferences. There are different methods of targeting, the easiest being the undifferentiated approach, trying to use the same strategy to fulfill everyone's requirements. This is a substandard style of managing people and is not recommended for leaders. The multi-segment approach, even though it's the most labor-intensive, it has demonstrated far greater success in the market. It involves finding the specific needs of each segment, like a group of customers with matching interests, and developing an exclusive strategy for each. This approach demands high levels of patience, determination, and effort, but is the ideal strategy of a good manager. So once you've targeted the interests of your team members, the next stage of marketing strategy development can commence: positioning or catering to those specific needs so as to enhance subordinates' impression of you. That's called face work in communication studies. If you want to train your team to exceed their job descriptions, then you will have to surpass yours first. Keep in mind that they will judge you as a person based on how much you go out of your way for them. And the best way to do this is through accommodation. That's a communication studies concept. It means how us humans naturally imitate the conversational style of the one we're talking to. So if someone talks to you in an extremely formal manner, you probably won't respond with street slang, right? My mom is an excellent example of this. She has mastered the ability to mirror the accent of anyone she speaks with, and we have an extremely diverse social circle. A leader should try to come down to a subordinate's level when interacting with them to put him or her at ease by showing that they are both normal people in the end, and there's no need for apprehension. Another good idea for how leaders can position themselves is through integrating face work, which involves upholding the faces, remember that means the public image and your impression, of people you interact with, like your subordinates. So there are three faces that a leader needs to help their subordinates preserve: fellowship, autonomy, and competence. The fellowship face is the desire to be included, be accepted, and be seen as likable. So this face can be fostered through verbal accommodation techniques, such as, humor, like joking around, and slang, to show that you both are on the same page, and nonverbal immediacy behaviors like smiling, turning towards them, and handshakes or high fives. Arranging for team meetings and opportunities to work together and, even engaging in non-work activities are additional fellowship builders. Essentially, leaders should work hard to make everyone in the team feel that they belong. Next, the autonomy phase is the desire for freedom and independence and to control one's own time. Leaders can support subordinates' autonomy phases by involving them in decision-making, agreeing to their requests whenever they can, and honoring their preferences even when they don't ask, such as scheduling heavy work in the afternoon because your subordinate is not a morning person. These will not only generate goodwill, but also raise employees' self-esteem, which boosts performance. Additionally, this kind of treatment grows a sense of responsibility in subordinates, which subsequently builds independence and lessens the manager's burden. Lastly, the competence phase is the desire to be seen as knowledgeable and competent. Genuinely encouraging subordinates and, providing confirming responses, like those are speech acts that make others feel listened to, like recognition, acknowledgement, and endorsement, and also, soliciting their input and implementing their ideas. All of those fulfill the needs of this phase. It's also important to use constructive rather than destructive criticism when team members make mistakes to prevent threatening the competence phase. According to Brathwaite's theory of reintegrative shaming, then constructive criticism, or reintegrative shaming, reduces deviant behavior, while stigmatization, or destructive criticism, will tag a negative label to the person that they will align their behavior with, exacerbating the problem. And so all of these three phases must be invested in to ensure success in the forming stage, so that, they know that you're looking out for them. After the cordial first phase of team development comes the more perilous storming period. This is where the inevitable conflicts of human interaction enter the stage, and how these conflicts are managed will determine whether the team will advance to the next level or undergo deforming, which is returning to square one. In communication studies, group conflicts are classified into three categories: pseudo-conflict, where members believe that their goals are incompatible when they really want the same thing; simple conflict, where there's an actual disagreement about how to achieve their goals because they have personal differences in opinion; and ego conflict, where the dispute moves away from the actual issue to emotionally attacking the other person. Leaders must be able to address each of these conflicts to successfully weather the storming stage, as being the peacemaker of a group is a reliable method of showing empathy while simultaneously gaining respect and authority. So it's a win-win. Resolving pseudo-conflicts involves promoting communication between team members. Since they both want the same thing, you just have to let them both know in their own language, kind of. and hearing all sides of the story so that misunderstandings can be cleared. Simple conflicts need creative solutions. The leader should act as a mediator and consult the team to explore solutions that address everyone's concerns. Working together towards a common goal reminds the team that, we're all on the same side. And clearing any obstacles in the team's work or relationships is a collective responsibility. Ego conflicts must be prevented and/or carefully managed, as they have the greatest potential to destroy a relationship. Leaders must rein in any affective or A-type conflict, a management concept describing emotional attacks that distract from the actual topic. A manager witnessing A-type conflict should swiftly steer the conversation towards C-type conflict, or cognitive conflict, where members tackle the issue at hand and the actual differences that must be untangled rather than each other. Because we don't want to, destroy that goodwill that we worked so hard to build, right? Okay, before moving on to the next phase, a variation in this approach must be clarified. When managers themselves are involved in a conflict, the desired outcome of resolution shifts from fairness to peace. While they may seem interchangeable, there's a noteworthy difference, since a good manager takes upon themselves the responsibility for solving the conflict promptly and, ending it, while keeping subordinates as happy as possible. So sometimes you have to put yourself under the bus for their sake. When a manager experiences disagreement with a member of their team, the manager should have the subordinate's satisfaction as a higher priority than receiving justice for themselves. A peaceful resolution requiring an extra task by the manager is better than a technically fair solution resulting in a disgruntled employee. Practically, this means the managers must shoulder the burden of a conflict by giving up their own preferences to accommodate a team member's preferences whenever possible. Of course, this should be done with wisdom and with the interests of the company in mind, as giving complete freedom to employees will stir up issues associated with the country club leadership style. The point is, leaders should try to let their teams have their way whenever possible, even if it means having to rearrange things on the leader's end, such as rescheduling a meeting due to an employee's expected absence, or paying the price for a worker's slip-up from their own pocket. So why all the sacrifice? Well, for one, the mean boss stereotype must be cleared for subordinates to be able to trust and cooperate willingly with managers. It's important to exhibit selflessness and let team members know that you are caring for their interests, not just your own. This allows them to focus less on looking out for themselves, since you're already taking care of that, and more on bringing team success, facilitating the transition to phase 3 of team development. Furthermore, research in management has shown that giving teams autonomy by letting them make business decisions is a key ingredient in building intrinsic motivation, which saves a manager more headache in the future than these extra investments may bring. Moreover, showing subordinates that you trust their choices gives them a sense of responsibility, according to management principles. And finally, the goodwill that's generated as a byproduct of all these sacrifices will elicit sentiments of indebtedness, appreciation, and loyalty from the team. These emotions mobilize people like nothing else, and this spark will, inshallah, light the fire of productivity that gives way to the renowned synergy of collaboration, or teamwork. If a leader can successfully navigate the storm, then glad tidings to them. The group will now enter the norming phase, achieving team cohesiveness as members find ways to join forces harmoniously in spite of their differences. After their storming experiences, the leader and team understand each other much better as shared values, rules, and norms are established. Leaders must have sufficient power or ability to control others' actions in order to influence these norms and steer them towards the dual priorities of task and relationships. Power can exist in different forms, with referent power based on goodwill and admiration surpassing the effectivity of coercive power based on fear, according to communication studies experts. Another piece of evidence revealing the superiority of the nice way. Finally, the part all managers have been waiting for, very patiently. The performing stage. If the team was a business, it would now be deemed a cash cow, an investment that has grown to its maximum potential and reached a point of, get this, low labor and high returns. Whew! After reinvesting profits, resisting the temptation to pick early fruits, enduring storms of conflict and sometimes letting yourself be exploited, and essentially relinquishing the present for the future, the time has come to reap what you have sown. Alhamdulillah, with established norms of conflict management and role expectations in place, and a full load of goodwill in the bank, leaders are now ready to start gradually cashing in their rewards. In other words, they can start receiving goodwill, most of which will happen naturally without any prompting from them. Think about it. You now have a cohesive team that respects, loves, and appreciates you for helping them become who they are and never giving up on them. You have made sacrifices for them, and now they are willing to make sacrifices for you. You have instilled in them a sense of ownership for the team, and in doing so, delegated the responsibility of keeping their ethics in check to well-developed moral compasses. Not only that, but you have influenced their values to care about their assigned tasks just as much as you do, leaving much more time for you to focus on the relationship aspect of the team. Empathy now exists throughout the team, and a collective spirit guides it. It's like one for all and all for one. It's a pleasure to work with such subordinates, and the level of cooperation you've earned through gentleness could never have been achieved through harshness. I would like to clarify here that the performing stage does not signal a retirement from empathy in building goodwill. It just means that your strategy has switched from growth to maintenance. Just like the owner of a cash cow cannot just abandon their business, and a farmer must continue to water his satsuma trees even when they're mature, a manager should not exploit or take full advantage of their subordinates' goodwill, nor should he or she stop accommodating his or her employees. Relationships run two ways, and if a leader stops doing their part, they are in danger of the self-explanatory phenomena of denorming, destorming, and deforming. Dun dun dun. So, what was the point of the initial exertion if a part of it must be upheld forever? Well, every investment needs maintenance. Called controlling in management, this is the last duty of a manager, maintaining the status quo by monitoring progress towards goals and taking corrective action when needed, since we cannot deal with ever-changing circumstances using an undifferentiated approach. We talked about that. So, think about the relationship like a house. Buying a house requires a hefty down payment, but owning it reduces the future costs to just maintenance and insurance. Renting a house has what business experts would call a low startup cost, but the monthly costs do not reduce over time. Plus, they never get to enjoy the benefits of owning a house. Over the years, the bought house will actually have a higher benefit to cost ratio than the rented house. In other words, a relationship that you heavily invested in establishing will be way more worth the cost in the end compared to a relationship in which you maintained average, moderate efforts since the beginning. For one, a deeply established relationship will soon enough go from unilateral to mutual. People tend to naturally, and often subconsciously, copy each other's mannerisms. If a leader is accommodating of his or her team, the team will be more inclined to accommodate the leader's shortcomings. Being kind and empathetic to a team with whom you have affable relations only gets easier as the social bond strengthens. On the other hand, if a leader does not show care for their team, the team won't have much concern for him or her either, which can translate into harmful actions ranging from unethical dishonesty to violent crime. Another benefit of the balanced team management style is the independence it cultivates in the team. A manager can leave a subordinate with some work and trust that it'll be done to the best of their ability. Furthermore, the norms and expectations established in the norming stage result in team members knowing what you want even before you ask. If you have a relationship of mutual goodwill, they will likely save your time by doing what they're supposed to without being told, and you won't have to sit on their heads. They will also be self-motivated to follow team rules and policies, and this kind of organizational commitment is recognized in management as a much more effective regulator than extrinsic incentives or deterrents. Even though issues may still arise from time to time, The team will be well equipped to resolve all three types of conflict. And with the values of both task and relationships up front, they will be driven to solve the problem as efficiently and effectively as possible. Moreover, if an empathetic team manager needs subordinates to exceed their job requirements, they'll be more entitled to, and thus more likely to receive, those favors. The lion will eventually need the mouse's voluntary support, which can only be attained by goodwill stashed beforehand. These all tie into the ultimate advantage of managing the nice way: peace of mind, a blessing awarded to those who have fulfilled the divine trust of authority. The terms job satisfaction, work-life balance, and self-esteem fail to capture the value of this scale-tipping benefit. When a leader and his or her subordinates know they can trust each other and take each other as well-wishers, have their work valued and appreciated, and are on the same page regarding their priorities, working together becomes something enjoyable and fulfilling, something to look forward to. It initiates a positive feedback loop of good experiences that inspire team spirit and contribution by everyone, which leads to more good experiences, and so on. Managers can relax, as they don't have to worry about defiance, dishonesty, dependence, distraction, disruption, or defense. In the end, everyone is happy. And what more could a manager, or really any human being, wish for? I would like to conclude by appreciating the most superior leader there ever was, the one and only God, for giving me the experience of a lifetime being managed by Him. He is entirely self-motivated to unwearingly guide His creations to success. He takes each of us as His own team and has our best interests in mind. He is infinitely generous and merciful, blessing us with more favors than we could ever count, and building more goodwill in the forming stage than we can ever repay. He chose the long route of achieving referent power, even though He could easily control us with coercive power alone. He does this so that we submit to His wise advice out of our own initiative, not under duress. He does not only care that we obey Him, but that we take Him as a well-wisher, so that we can enjoy job satisfaction in our journey to Him. He promises not only the extrinsic reward of paradise, but also the intrinsic satisfaction of doing the right thing and fulfilling our purpose in life. He steers us right in our storming conflicts when we ask Him for help, and He instills in us the highest values during norming so that we can achieve our true potential. Finally, He is ready to wait up to an entire lifetime for a subordinate of His to start performing. Practicing the religion of Islam has truly brought interdisciplinarity to my life. I mean, when you take the diverse knowledge and experiences that you acquired through various means and in different settings, and you put it all into the context of the worldview that Allah SWT has taught us, taking into account that hereafter and the fact that this life is a temporary test, then everything makes sense and every piece of knowledge fits perfectly into the puzzle. So, we know who we are, where we came from, and where we're going to return to in the end. And because of that, we know exactly what to do and what our manager, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, expects of us without having to ask or look back and reference every time. And so, when we have all these things into consideration, that this is the right way, this is exactly what we're supposed to do, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing it for our own good, then what happens is that people who understand this are going to happily and contentedly accept His authority and the path that, He's taking us through. And isn't that the goal of management? So my final message to anyone who is looking to be a great manager is: start by appreciating the remarkable leader who has offered to manage you. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen.